We are now going to take a look at the PMI Project Management Framework. We use this word framework in a somewhat loose sense. It is actually a collection of processes. As you can see, we have 47 processes that are split into 10 columns. You can think of a process as a box that has inputs and outputs. There are tools and techniques in the box that transform the inputs into outputs. As you look at this framework that has 10 columns and 5 colors, the columns refer to what are known as knowledge areas. You can see integration, scope, time, cost, etc. That means that all of the knowledge in project management falls into one of these buckets, if you will. Each bucket represents a column or a knowledge area. What are the 5 colors that you see? The colors refer to how we tend to get work done as human beings. Whether we are cooking dinner or getting ready to go to work, we always first do some sort of initiation, laying the groundwork, even before planning, and then we plan. While we are planning, we might execute a little bit, then come back to planning, execute a little more, and so on. So we have initiation, planning, and execution. And while we are planning and executing, we are always watching the clock, so to speak. We are trying to figure out if we are executing according to plan. Of course, when we talk about plan, we are not only talking about time, but also cost, quality, among other things. But the notion of monitoring and control is used in this broad sense to refer to checking every now and then whether we are on plan or not on plan. And if we are not on plan, how do we get back to plan? Finally, we have closing, which is wrapping things up. So you can think of these 5 colors as essentially how we as human beings get things done. We initiate, we plan, we execute, we plan a little more, execute a little more, and so on. And while we are planning and executing, we're monitoring and controlling. And finally, at the end, we're closing. So those are the 5 colors you see. Now let's make sense of the predominance of planning. You can see that most of the 47 processes here are planning processes. Does that mean we spend most of our time and money on planning? Certainly not. What it does mean is that we have a larger checklist associated with planning. That is the best way to think of the predominance of planning. Another point we want to associate with this framework is that there is no temporal or time order to the columns. It is not as if the integration column comes first, then scope, then time, and then cost, and so on. The processes in the columns can generally be going on concurrently. However, while there is not a defined order to the columns, there are some dependencies. For example, you cannot do a lot of work on time and cost if you have not done a fair amount of work on scope. So, in order to come up with schedule and cost, you need to have thought about scope a little bit. And by scope, I mean what is actually being done on this project, namely the product or the service. Other than scope coming first, the other columns can occur concurrently. While that is not strictly true because there are some dependencies, it is right to think of it this way as we take a high-level look at the framework.